As humans, we communicate at roughly 165 words per minute, which is basically a bicycle with training wheels compared to the speed at which our brain can process information. And it's one of the main reasons it's so difficult to focus and not have our minds wander to the sports game from the night before or what it is we have to pick up from the grocery store.
Good day, dear listeners. Steve Reda here with the Management Blueprint podcast. And my guest today is Katie O'Malley, the founder of Encourage Coaching. She has helped over 200 leaders and leadership teams prevent toxic workspace experiences and create cultural transformations across the US and the UK. Katie, welcome to the show.
Steve, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here and really eager for our conversation and to be helpful to your audience.
Oh, I'm sure you will be very helpful. You bring a different perspectives than what we had the previous 300 guests. So definitely very interesting. But let's start with my favorite question, which is, what is your personal why and what are you doing to manifest it in your practice?
Absolutely. So, my personal why goes all the way back to when I was in college studying political science. I have always wanted to make a positive impact in the world, the communities that I'm a part of, the connections and the relationships that I have. And that thread has pulled throughout my entire career, whether it was working on political campaigns and nonprofit organizations or in higher education. And eventually what I realized is I had this kind of itch for small business ownership, entrepreneurship, having the agency and autonomy to work the way that I wanted to work, and took that, combined it with my why of really helping folks at the intersection of mental health and work. It's where we spend 8, 10, 12 hours of our day. And to think that it doesn't have an impact on how we move through the world or our overall well being is bonkers. And so I spend my days really helping folks to align their strengths, talents, and values with the roles and organizations that they're pursuing, and also working on the other side of the equation, on the employer side of the equation, training up their leaders to do no harm to their teams and employees throughout the workday. And so, yeah, my why is, how do we help people have at worst a net neutral experience in their workday, and at best a workday that elevates their life outside of work?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge thing. And a lot of companies don't realize that they have these employees in the company. And if they are happy, they're going to be much more productive. They are going to project a much better impression of the company to the outside world. They are going to make their customers happier. So it's really worth investing in improving the mental health of and the happiness of the people in the company. That's a big lever that you're pulling there.
Yeah.
So let's take this as a good pivot point, because we are podcast and of frameworks, as you know, and our listeners know. And I'm always on the hunt for a good framework that someone have discovered. And what you do, I mean, definitely is an important topic. And you talk about the empathy. You have background in counseling. So you came up with a framework called the Power of Listening framework, and I would love it for you to explain why it's important and how does it work with our listeners.
Yeah. Yeah. So I call it the AIR methodology, AIR. A stands for attention, I stands for intention, R stands for recognition. And this is actually the amalgamation of my training and education as a counselor, where I spent 3 years learning how to listen for a living, right? That was the entirety of the program. And one of the most brilliant books that I ever read was one called On Dialogue, and it was written by an astrophysicist of
Mhm.
all folks. His name is Dr. David Bohm, and essentially what he had come up with were the building blocks of dialogue. So how are we actually communicating with one another? And from there started to learn the entire listening skill set, which includes so many different practices that folks need to be engaging in to listen well. But it can be really overwhelming for someone who is not in the field of counseling, therapy, helping professionals, coaching, to say, all right, I'm going to spend all of this time, effort, and energy learning this skill set that, while is important for me as a leader, actually is not what I specialize in because I'm a website developer, I'm a software engineer, I am the chief financial officer of a company. That's where my expertise lies. And so instead of making the attempt to educate and train folks up on the dozens of skills of listening, really trying to distill them down into three main practices. So the
Okay.
AIR methodology, what I say is listening is a function of attention. And if we are unable to start by giving someone our full attention, we're never going to be able to actually listen to them, to be able to hear them. And it sounds simple, right? But there's nothing easy about giving someone your attention these days. We're living in a $1 billion attention economy where our attention is being hijacked every few seconds with pings and emails and interruptions, and to overlay that on a brain that constantly wants to be stimulated can be very difficult. And
Mhm.
so when we're talking about intention and recognition, it's not just about offering those pieces to the person that you are in conversation with or listening to or in dialogue with, but you're also applying that methodology to yourself as well. How are you attending to the reaction that's happening in your heart, your mind, your body? How are you intending to also understand what's happening with you and recognize you are a human and not a robot? You're going to have an emotional response, but how are you recognizing that simply by listening to what someone else has to share in their perspective doesn't mean you're rubber stamping it or agreeing with it. You're just giving them the space to be seen and heard by you, which, as humans, it's the reason we're here. It's the
Yeah.
reason that Homo sapiens are here and Neanderthals went by the wayside. We lived in community and supported each other in ways that they did not. And so
Just
listening
to
and
add,
attention is a big part of that.
yeah, just to add a remark here. So when I was a Vistage facilitator, Vistage a peer group company, and
Yeah.
when I was a facilitator there, we had a saying there among these Vistage facilitators that listening is so close to love that you cannot say the difference.
Mhm.
So it was very interesting
I
that
love
yeah,
that.
people are hungry for being listened to, and it's very powerful. So sorry, I broke your train of thought. So attention. What about intention?
Yep. So there's attention and then intention. I always say your intention is going to be the same for every conversation or dialogue you enter into. And the intention is simply to truly understand what the other person is trying to communicate to you. That's it. You are not trying to respond. You're not trying to agree or disagree. You're not trying to find holes or points of connection. You are simply there to understand what it is they are trying to communicate. And we can do that by paraphrasing what we're hearing, summarizing what they've said when they get to the end, asking clarifying questions, collecting observations about what it is you're seeing from them. So even being able to say, oh my gosh, you seem to get really energized when you started talking about X. Can you tell me more about that? The intention is to understand and generate more information until you fully understand what it is they're trying to communicate, while at the same time trying to understand what's happening for yourself as they're communicating perhaps new or differing ideas and perspectives.
Yeah, I love it. That it's about really being present and really understand what the other trying to convey, as opposed to thinking about our own response.
Mhm,
For example,
mhm,
or a sports game from last night. And this is hard work. Listening is much harder than talking, right? People
mhm.
think that communication is all about conveying messages, but it's at least as much, if not more, about receiving messages from the other person.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I was on a podcast, recorded a podcast yesterday, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you have the gift of gab, you're so good at this." And I said, I might have the gift of gab, but that all stems from being able to really listen to somebody else and ask good questions and keep them talking so that I have something more full and whole to be able to respond to, and it's so difficult to do. As humans, we communicate at roughly 165 words per minute, which is basically a bicycle with training wheels compared to the speed at which our brain can process information. And it's one of the main reasons it's so difficult to focus and not have our minds wander to the sports game from the night before or what it is we have to pick up from the grocery store. But it's one of the reasons that in that attention piece, if we're really engaging in the performance of active listening through our nonverbal affects, it can really help to keep us focused and our attention where it needs to be.
Mhm. Okay, very interesting. So attention, intention. What about recognition?
Yeah, recognition. Steve, I don't know about you, but I truly feel the world would be better off if each of us moved through the world trying to recognize the humanness and the humanity of the people that we're interacting with. And one of the very best ways to be able to do that is confer dignity and respect through your ability to attend to them and also have that intention of just sheer understanding, suspending judgment and assumption, right? So, this is where we pull in some of the research from David Bohm. We get in our own way of being able to connect with other humans because we are making assumptions and judgments that we have and have evolved to have. And so, when we're able to recognize our own assumptions and judgments, it really clears the way for us to confer greater dignity and respect through our listening and desire to understand.
I love it how you explained the respect, recognition. I've been struggling with explaining this. One of the core values of my practice and my company is treating everyone with respect. And I kind of struggled. It was a visceral thing that I wanted to have as a core value, but I couldn't really explain it satisfactorily to other people why it's important. I mean, it's obviously important, but I love how you talk about the humanity of the others, the conferring dignity to the other person, and the judgment piece, suspending judgment. That is the challenging thing, not to be courteous, but to actually giving people the benefit of the doubt or the benefit of our doubts,
Mhm,
our lack of
mhm.
knowledge, or being grounded and being self-aware. So love it. So attention, intention, and recognition. That's a great framework. Any user manual that you could attach to this? So how do I
Yeah,
QR?
and yeah, so the user manual for it is actually going to be delivered from a TEDx stage in Boston at the end of next month. So while I love to give it all away, the best pieces of this, I'm just so excited to share from
Mhm,
the red dot on the TEDx stage. But for folks that are really looking to engage in this practice, I think the biggest thing that you can do is just start with the attention
mhm,
focus. Because, like I said, listening is a function of attention. If we cannot give our undivided attention to somebody else, it's going to be really challenging to offer that intention of listening to understand and the recognition of their humanity. If our eyes are wandering, um, if we're checking our phones, if we're being pinged and vibrated away from the person, it makes it really, really challenging. And so, for anyone looking to improve their listening, I encourage you to start with focusing on your attending behaviors. So, things like the nonverbals around making eye contact, leaning in, nodding your head, saying things along the way like, tell me more. That's so interesting. These are things that we call minimal encouragers that
mhm.
keep people talking, but also keep you focused because you are bringing your physical self to attention, which then also helps your brain and those are really speedy neural pathways stay focused on the present and in that moment you're in.
Yeah. It just reminded me that actually well-known thought leader, I'm not going to say his name, in one of his CD recordings, he made this comment, which is actually the opposite. So it's about faking attention when you really don't have the bandwidth. And he explained a situation that he's driving home after an exhausting workshop, and his wife is picking him up from the airport, and he's got a much younger wife who's very chatty, and basically she wants to give her the space, but he really doesn't have the bandwidth anymore to focus. And he kind of shares this practice that whenever his wife finishes a sentence, he just repeats the last word with a question mark,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
she keeps on going, she keeps on going. But anyhow, I guess this is a negative example of this.
No, no, it's I mean, what you're describing there from this thought leader is a practice called verbal tracking,
Mm,
right? So how can we demonstrate to someone that we're listening to perform listening without having them feel like they're being interrogated by us, right? And so repeating a word or a phrase that caught your attention or you want a little more information on and putting a question mark at the end, that is a great practice, but do it from a place of actual interest and not fake interest. And
yeah.
I would say sometimes we don't have the bandwidth to listen the way that we want to and offer that respect and dignity because we don't have the cognitive or emotional or physical capacity in that moment and in those times it's okay to say, I don't think I have the capacity to give you the attention that you deserve. Can we find a time later today or tomorrow, or in the example that you gave, after we get home, have some dinner, I can then really take that time to attend to you in the way that you deserve. That can go a really long way as well.
Okay, that's good. I'm glad that this is a legit approach. So you say that the upcoming TEDx talk is going to be about that. Is it going to be about the air framework?
Yeah, it's focusing in on the air framework and I start with a story from childhood where I get essentially punished, grounded by my mom for not listening to a friend. And she was the first person to help me see that listening is a show of respect, listening is a show of dignity, listening is the only way that we can really connect with someone and demonstrate that we care. And in doing that, it will be reciprocated on the other side. And she caught me in a moment on the phone in the kitchen, being attached to the wall in the early 90s, not doing that. And it was essentially, this is not how we treat people in this household. And you are now grounded for 2 weeks. And let's talk about how you can change this moving forward. And that was 1993. I was 11 years old. And for parents
Hmm.
who are listening to this, if you're wondering if your kids listen to you, I am living proof that they do. That conversation informs what I do for a living now.
Just have to ground them for 2 weeks, and then they
2
go.
weeks. And
That's
I'd never been grounded before, Steve. I was 11 years old, had never been grounded, and I got grounded for not listening, or giving the space for my friend Jenny to share her stories with me.
what a gift from a parent to do
Yeah.
that. Must have been very comfortable for her, because as a parent, when you ground a child, it just puts more burden on you, because then they're gonna be around. You have to keep them engaged. You have to make sure that they don't break the grounding, because then you lose your power to ground them again, or to this. That's huge. That's huge. Now that you're explaining this, I just recall that when I was a Vistage facilitator, one of the things we did was we had these so-called coaching sessions when we would meet with the CEOs and spend an hour and a half with them. And what I noticed was that most of the CEOs actually didn't want to be coached. They just wanted to be listened to. So they
Mhm.
wanted a sympathetic ear, someone who actually understood what they were going through, who had a similar entrepreneurial background, and they didn't want to be coached, but they really wanted to be heard. And the service we were providing was to listen to them. And it actually was a very tiring process, to be honest with you. It was more
Yeah.
tiring than as if we had a conversation, because the attention, when you speak, you don't have to focus your attention because you are essentially stream of consciousness, right? But when the
Mhm.
other person thinks, then you have to control your thoughts and be present, exactly what you explained.
Yeah, there's nothing easy about listening. It takes a great amount of energy and effort. There's a reason for folks who are in helping professions like coaching and therapy, so much time in that training and education is focused on just how to listen, because especially at the top with CEOs, it's so lonely up there. The things that they're feeling really challenged by, it's hard to necessarily share that with the folks in your C suite, because everyone's kind of experiencing the same thing. And so to be able to find a partner that is really willing to listen, to understand, and not just offer solutions, it's what we all want as humans, whether we are in the mailroom or in the C suite.
Yeah, it's easy to be a fixer. It's harder to be patient and bear the pain of the other person explaining their predicament, and
Yes.
be present and share that, and empathize with it. It's much harder. Okay, very great. Well, before we wrap this up, I like to just ask a question, because in our pre interview you mentioned about the Legos, that you actually use Legos not to build castles and houses and playgrounds and other things, but you actually use it to build teams. So how can
Yes.
one use Legos to build teams?
Yes. So, my gosh, I love Lego Serious Play. It's another methodology that I leverage in my coaching practice. And the Lego Serious Play as an idea actually came from the folks at Lego. Back in the 90s, they were really struggling with their bottom line. Kids weren't interested in Legos, so parents weren't buying them. And even though adults now are, this is very much hobby central for so many adults, they didn't have products that were really engaging them. And they said, what if we took our product to solve the problem of selling our product? And one of the things that they realized throughout this process is that there was very little trust within the Lego organization. So people weren't sharing their ideas out of fear of having that idea stolen. They also weren't sharing ideas out of fear that they would be looked at or admonished for it not being a great idea or a great perspective. People weren't feeling valued. And so Lego Serious Play has two different tracks to it. One is about trust building, collaboration, and teaming, and the other is about solving those really wicked problems that require some out of the box creativity from folks. But the main practices of it are everybody builds. Even if you think you are not creative, you are going to start clicking blocks together until some idea comes your way. So everybody builds, everybody shares, which means everyone around the table, again, whether you are in the C suite or you are an executive assistant to someone in the C suite or anyone in between, everyone gets the same amount of space and time to present their ideas.
Mhm.
And at the end, what you have around the table are this brilliant collection of ideas. And the goal, Steve, is not to select the best idea, who built the best solution, the best outcome, the best program from this pile of bricks. It's the beauty of Lego is you can break off pieces of a Lego build and connect it to somebody else's.
Mhm.
So the idea being, how are we breaking off the best of the ideas that we have and coming together to build something new? This is how we ended up with all of the Lego movies, Legoland, all of the different Lego kits that now we see Lego having just a presence even at the airport. I feel like Lego is just omnipresent whenever I'm out and about. But from a teaming perspective, it's really about building trust. So oftentimes when I go in to facilitate a team building session with Lego, I'll say, If I asked you right now to turn to your partner and share about your childhood, you would roll your eyes at best and likely walk out of the room at worst because it's so vulnerable, right? But if I say, all right, I want you to build with your Legos a building, right, that was really meaningful to you in childhood. And then I'm going to ask you after you finish building it to explain all of the different pieces that you selected to build this building. Suddenly, we're getting stories about grandma's special spaghetti sauce, right? And how important this was to the glue of the family as you were growing up. Stories you would never share necessarily with a colleague or be prompted to share, all because you were able to externalize it into a stack of bricks. And suddenly, it's not your experience, but it is this model and it takes the vulnerability out of the equation for a second to let people start to share things
Mm,
that really establish trust on teams.
that's very interesting. So you externalize an emotion through this plastic toy. You can actually talk about it. That's fascinating. Well, definitely,
Magic.
yeah, it's something our listeners can try at home. It's not too dangerous or in their office.
Nope. Nope. They absolutely can.
So if someone would like to learn more about the Lego serious play that you do, and also maybe the air techniques or anything else, they want to be at your TEDx talk, if they want to learn where it's going to be, where should they go and how can they connect with you?
Yeah, so head over to my website, encouragecoaching.org, but also sharing the most up to date information in a pretty dynamic way on different social media platforms. So on LinkedIn, give me a follow, backslash Kate O'Malley 82, or on Instagram at Encourage Coach Chicago, where you can stay up to date on all of the great stuff coming down the pike.
Fantastic, fantastic. So definitely, if you like to listen better to your people, so that you get them to engage and do more for your company, or just to build better relationships with them, then definitely check out Katie's website, encouragecoaching.org, and hit her up on LinkedIn and Instagram and other places. And if you enjoyed this show, please give us a follow on YouTube, give us a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you are listening to us. And make sure that you keep on listening, because every week I'm bringing an exciting guest with good ideas that you can apply in your business to you. So thank you for coming, Katie, and thank you for listening.